On today's episode, grab your pitchforks and ready your battle axes as we delve into the deep tactical distractions, deceit and duplicity of the Battle of Hastings in 1066 between King Harold of England and William, the Duke of Normandy. In 1066, it was the period of the Anglo-Saxons, where democracy operated similar to our present-day democracy. However, power was ultimately in the hands of the Anglo-Saxon people. For 1066, the Anglo-Saxon democratic system was ahead of its time. This shared power trickled a long way down the food chain, giving rights, which meant that owning land was owned by, you guessed it, the people. Peasantry, people of low social status, typically associated with farming, also known as agricultural labourers, could own land and feel they had rights. And if there was a cry for help from the king in the local landowners' region, then aid would be given. All this Anglo-Saxon democratic system sounds great, doesn't it? Except for the Duke of Normandy, William, who operated an entirely different form of ruling. You can forget all about the democracy and owning land. William preferred the feudal system. William looked beyond France and liked the look of the land across the English Channel. That's right, he liked the look of England. You have to remember, in 1066, in medieval times, looking at land and attempting to conquer lands was all part of life and success. If you weren't conquering, you were conquered. But you can't just roll in, roll up, and roll out the competition. Battles take planning, cunning, intelligence, deception, and time to win. So, the Battle of Hastings. War, fight, conquer, win, triumph. Except, I'm sure you've heard the expression, Rome wasn't built in a day. And the same applies to battle. You cannot turn up one day and commence an invasion. It takes time and understanding the weakness of your opponent. Remember the phrase agricultural labourers at the beginning we mentioned? That's right, the farming of the country. In 1066, farming was essential to keep the country alive. And unlike now, where people had machinery to harvest, in 1066, harvesting crops was done by people, the population of the country, even including the army. So in September 1066, King Harold's army and his country were busy harvesting. England is an island with water all around it. From a military perspective, this is a great advantage for King Harold and his navy fleet. However, he didn't own all of the ships there, nor did he directly pay all the crews. Firstly, William needed to arrange an invasion army to invade England for battle by reaching England across the sea. Secondly, he needed to arrange a fleet of ships to carry his invading army across the water. But how do you cross the water from one island to another undetected? Put simply, distraction and duplicity. William knew that he needed to distract King Harold's army away from the coast. If his invading army tried to invade from the south coast of England, well, King Harold could thwart them. So, to raise enough for this invasion and battle, because he wouldn't have just had the money lying around in his back pocket, he had to offer a distraction to King Harold, and he needed men to fight for him. William offered King Harold's brother Tostig and Harold Hardrada, King of Viking Norway, whatever they could take England north of the River Trent if they were successful in battle against King Harold. But why would somebody's brother betray and attack them? Well, who wouldn't want the chance to overthrow King Harold and become king? Both Tostig and Harold Hardrada had reasonable claim to the throne if they were successful. This duplicity, put simply, the deceit and double-crossing from Tostig and Harold towards the king gave distraction. King Harold had no choice but to send his remaining army, 1,000 or so men, north to fight this battle, including sending his navy fleet from the south coast to the North Sea. And so, the two most important earls of northern England mustered their forces and gave battle to Hardrada and Tostig, who had been spurred on to commence battle by William. The earls of York were defeated. Hardrada could now occupy York, the second city of England, an important city in 1066. Now, the 1,000 or so army King Harold had sent to battle north of England were the best he had. They were his personal, professional bodyguard, and the best trained force of trained soldiers in England. But they were trained as infantry, and I don't know about you, but I'd be pretty tired before the battle even started having to walk there first. King Harold had no choice but to march north and reclaim York. By the end of September, King Harold engaged the Viking invaders outside of York at Stamford Bridge. Hardrada and Tostig were killed, and a small remnant of their invasion force escaped. So, the balance of the battle seems to have levelled out, a win each in theory, leaving England with their country intact and the invaders at a loss with no York to occupy. Seems like this battle was pretty pointless to try, doesn't it? But do you remember earlier when we spoke about distraction and duplicity? Well, this is where all the strategic planning, cunning and intelligence comes back in. The battle in the north of York, well, that was all smoke and mirrors, distracting King Harold, and wow did it work. Just think, you're in a boat leaving France, heading to England, and you're worried you'll be stopped by the Navy fleet. But, oh, wait, where is everyone? Ah, yes, they're in the North Sea fighting off the Vikings from Norway. Phew. You arrive on land and you creep around, worrying you'll bump into King Harold's army. But no one confronts you, but why? And unfortunately, it wasn't King Harold. William had the plan. He knew the English army would be occupied with the harvest. He knew deceiving King Harold with tossing in a Hadrada in the north would cause a great distraction that would allow him to access the south coast for his invasion. All that was left was the Battle of Hastings. With York in the north now secure again under English rule, King Harold didn't have a moment to lose before marching his army back down the country to East Sussex to face the invasion from William and his army from Normandy. A round trip of just under 600 miles for King Harold and his best army had undisputedly left them exhausted from marching. An army, mainly infantry and a few archers, saw them strategically choose their battlefield, occupying a hilltop immediately to the south of the modern town of Battle, undoubtedly called as such today due to this particular battle. William was preparing for battle, with his army consisting of infantry, archers, and cavalry, who would be wearing armoury and unlikely to be as tired as the English army. The medieval mind had difficulties handling numbers over 1,000, and so the exact figure of each opposing army cannot be ascertained. However, it is reasonable estimate to suggest between 9,000 and 15,000 on either side ready for battle. But William had another advantage up his battle sleeve. His army of Normans and French were largely professional forces of war, as intermittent warfare was the norm of their continent in the 11th century. However, the same cannot be said for the army of King Harold of England. In contrast, his army had a large hardcore group of his personal professional bodyguards trained to high standards. The majority of the army was made up of a militia called the Fired. The militia was not so well trained, not so well disciplined, and not so well ready for battle. Prepare your battle cries. March on the opposing side and fight for your country. All this sneaky battle planning on behalf of William had finally come to fruition for the Battle of Hastings against King Harold of England, fighting to keep his country and men. This battle would have been relentless, with no modern day weaponry, and would have been a complete bloodbath. Like the song, they hacked away from 9 to 5. What a way to make a living. Or in this case, what a way to make a killing. The Norman archers could have gotten through as much as 500,000 arrows in 30 to 50 minutes. It must have been tiring though, as they were firing uphill and would most likely have been ineffective. Also somewhat ineffective in this battle for England were the Norman and French cavalry. Ever heard the expression, losing an uphill battle? Well, I'd imagine that's how the Normans and French felt attempting to ascend the hilltop, as charging on a horse uphill would have been a poor strategy. So with William at a disadvantage in battle, King Harold must have been patting himself on the back in the middle of the Battle of Hastings. His positioning was serving his advantages, leaving the infantry to essentially battle it out in close combat with edged weapons of their time. We're talking spears, battle axes, swords, and even sharp farm tools. The fried militia are farmers who don't have weapons of mass destruction. They have medieval weapons of farming destruction. Who do you think has the advantage in the infantries? The Normans and French with their weapons of war and expertise in battle, or the English with their pitchforks and lack of war training? Even though the Normans and French did not walk 500 miles and more for battle, after several hours of combat they needed a rest, and so withdrew from their siege of the hilltop. During this interval, the English army, typically the Fired militia, misunderstood their withdrawal for rest, and so a portion of them chased after them down the hilltop. Perhaps to chase them off from battle, perhaps they thought to win and attack while they rested. Either way, it was a terrible idea, because chasing the enemy away from the tactical advantage of the hilltop actually resulted in this portion of the Fired militia to not only be separated from the king's army, but allowed William to use his cavalry to attack them in flank as they were running down the hill. And with this, it gave William an even better tactical decision to make. Continue to fake more of his army withdrawing to rest, as he watched more of the Fired giving chase, resulting in wiping out the Fired militia. Perhaps no one could foresee the inexperienced English army falling for the old fake and run trick. It is unclear whether the Anglo-Saxon army broke ranks during the battle due to orders or lack of discipline. We aren't sure if the English army of Anglo-Saxons broke formation in battle to chase the invaders because they were told to do so, or because they ignored their commands to keep position and followed their own choice to die running down the hill. It would be too easy to say that all of the tactical successes of William were what defeated King Harold. While the tactical success greatly helped shape the battlefield, the collapse of the English command and control were not the sole reason the invasion was a success. And of course, Harold soon followed them in death. Was it an arrow to King Harold's eye? Unfortunately, nobody can be sure, but we can be sure of one thing. Dead is dead. The English withdrew from the battlefield in relatively good order considering the day they had had. But alas, England's most professional troops were wiped out at the Battle of Hastings. It is undeniable that William, the Duke of Normandy, had a very astute, strategic brain with the intelligence and experience to defeat Anglo-Saxon England at both a macro and micro level. The Battle of Hastings was extremely poignant in William, Duke of Normandy's invasion, as he had successfully invaded England and killed King Harold and his brothers. With the Battle of Hastings done, William continued his move on to London, first turning east and following the Kent coastline. This was another smart tactical feat, as it allowed his fleet waiting in the waters to supply the army, crucial after the battle. As with any invasion, William burned and pillaged as he marched on the country. He was crowned in Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day in 1066, just 2 months after the Battle of Hastings. But he didn't have it easy taking over England. It took William over a decade to subdue England to him, his feudal system and his savage tactics to achieve his reign. The Battle of Hastings and the aftermath of the downfall of the Anglo-Saxon King of England had a profound political, social and economic effect, firstly on England and progressively over time in Wales, Scotland and Ireland.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel and watch our next episode.